long story short, guys, if you see Excipients QS mentioned on the product composition, run. Vigorous Steve here. Let's continue with the How to Recognize Quality Anabolic Androgenic Steroids video series and discuss third world pharmaceuticals. And I want to limit it to third world pharmaceuticals that produce anabolic androgenic steroids, not the third world pharmaceuticals that produce ancillaries like selective estrogen receptor modulators or aromatase inhibitors or other useful medicines and drugs which might be beneficial for your bodybuilding or fitness journey. These medications are sold at the pharmacy within the country of manufacturing because after all they are FDA approved and suitable for use in clinical settings. They might still get distributed worldwide through normal supply chain for pharmaceuticals or end up on the online pharmacies. This video is specifically about third world pharmaceuticals that produce anabolic androgenic steroids and have compounds that are not FDA approved anywhere, like Trenbolone, for example, or Mastrone. Both of those used to be FDA approved, but are since discontinued from the original manufacturer, but are still being produced under pharmaceutical settings in a third world country for export only. Again, they don't have the license, they don't have FDA approval to sell these compounds within the same country of manufacturing. So right after manufacturing, they're immediately exported and then distributed all over the world. So that's the scope of this video. Before we get into it, please like the video, leave a comment for the algorithm, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Now, first things first, if you have a choice, right? You have the choice to use first world pharmaceutical grade anabolic steroids or third world pharmaceutical grade or reputable underground labs, right? Let's say you have a choice between all three. Personally, I would either choose between true pharmaceutical grade coming from a first world country, FDA approved in most of the Western world, or a reputable underground lab. And the reason why I don't like third world pharmaceuticals is because they're kind of bending the rules of the local FDA. And again, the carrier oils that they tend to choose to suspend their raw powders in, not the best quality from all the research that I've done so far. So if you have a choice, personally, I would avoid third world pharmaceuticals. It will give you all of the insight that you need to know in this video. So let me explain how third world pharmaceuticals differ from underground labs, right? Underground labs are usually made by one individual in their kitchen using beakers and whatever instrument they need to make anabolic androgenic steroids. But third world pharmaceuticals are generally produced in a pharmaceutical company with all of the machinery that's required to make pharmaceuticals. They might be following ISO standards like the 9001 or whatever ISO standards they need to form. So it's a true pharmaceutical environment in which these third world pharmaceuticals are produced, but they still produce pharmaceuticals which are not FDA approved, like Trenbolone acetate, for example, or Mastrone propionate, or Boldenone undeslinate. If you see these products under a product list, it automatically disqualifies this particular brand from being a first world pharmaceutical. So it can still be a third world pharmaceutical that produces these products under pharmaceutical-like conditions. So if you see these products on the product list, it's not first world pharmaceuticals, but these products might still be produced under pharmaceutical-like conditions, meaning that they're sterile, accurately dosed, the pharmaceutical ingredient within the product is exactly as mentioned on the label. So everything is pharmaceutical-like, but it's not exactly pharmaceutical because, again, they don't have to follow particular guidelines set by the FDA within the country of manufacturing. But that doesn't always exactly hold up because sometimes these products are exported and then imported again by a distributor, ending up at the pharmacy nonetheless, albeit that they're sold under the table because, again, they're not FDA approved locally. It's a little bit of a different setup compared to a regular underground lab that is produced by one person that orders their steroid raws online and then starts home brewing. The third world pharmaceuticals are all produced under pharmaceutical-like conditions in a proper pharmaceutical company with all the pharmaceutical machinery that are not accessible to people that are home brewing. So the third world pharmaceutical might have proper packaging with a serial code or a QR code or a barcode and contain an insert with a truncated version of a true pharmaceutical insert that is a multitude of pages long, right? It might be a small insert containing the anabolic androgenic rating, for example, right? Or how it affects muscle accrual. And these products are specifically produced for bodybuilders. That's an insert aimed towards bodybuilders that might read, okay, boldenone dry gains and nandrolone is wet gains, right? Something like this, for example. I mean, they try their best, but it's not a medical insert. It's an insert aimed towards bodybuilders or people who are going to use these products for their fitness aspirations. And it's the same with the oral steroids or the ancillaries that come in tablet form. These pharmaceutical companies have access to a tablet presser. Again, tablet pressers are generally not available to underground labs. That's why they make everything in capsules or in solutions, for example, with a dropper. Again, the Third World Pharmaceutical has access to all of the medical equipment required to make pharmaceuticals properly. Their blister strips will contain the batch number and the expiration date. The ampules will contain the expiration date and the batch number, or the vials will contain this information. All of the peptides on their product list are produced with a vacuum and might contain a custom top that you can flip off. But it all looks very, very professional. They put great effort and money and care into making their brand look very, very pharmaceutical-like and might come very, very close to being an actual pharmaceutical. But there's just a couple things off that prevent them from being classified as a true pharmaceutical, which we'll discuss later on in this video. So the first thing you can look into, and where a lot of the misconceptions are coming from, preventing people from understanding what is the difference between a third world pharmaceutical produced for export only and a first world true pharmaceutical that produces medicines for local use in clinical settings, is the word pharma or pharmaceutical. Not every company with the name pharma or pharmaceutical in their brand name is of actual true pharmaceutical quality that can pass United States Pharmacopoeia guidelines and produces products with good manufacturing practices or good laboratory practices, like I mentioned in the previous video. So when you see pharma or pharmaceutical, that doesn't exactly mean that it's of pharmaceutical grade. It could still be third world pharmaceutical or even an underground lab, right? Pharma sounds very sexy and appealing, but it is not indicative of the quality whatsoever. And keep in mind, not all the pharmaceutical companies have pharmaceutical or pharma in their name, like Actavis, for example, or American Regent, Bayer, Galenica, Norma Hellis, Pfizer, Rotex Medica, Watson Laboratories. None of these companies have pharma or pharmaceuticals in their company name. And then on the flip side of that, you have Cipla Pharmaceuticals, Desma Healthcare, also known as Laboratory Pharmaceutico SIT, Endo Pharmaceuticals, Hikma Pharmaceutica, also known as Westward Pharmaceuticals, Pharmacia and Upjohn, a subsidiary of Pfizer, Rising Pharmaceuticals, Wilshire Pharmaceuticals, Jelfa Pharma, Nexus Pharmaceuticals, and March Pharmaceuticals, not to be mistaken with Merck. March Pharmaceuticals is a company here in Thailand that produces a lot of pharmaceuticals as well. So as you see, many of these companies, many of these pharmaceutical companies, they don't put pharma in their company name. And what you see with third world pharmaceuticals is they put that pharma or pharmaceutical in the brand name, put it on nice and thick in bold letters, so you might think it's pharmaceutical grade with the same quality as a first world pharmaceutical. But again, they're not being scrutinized because they're produced for export only, and they're not passing through the local FDA, allowing them to be sold within the local pharmacy. So that's something you can look into. If it says pharma or pharmaceutical on the product packaging, look for company limited or industries or limited, right? Look for a little abbreviation of the company structure. If that's not there, that's a red flag. Because many of these pharmaceuticals, they mention their company structure right behind their brand name or their company name to indicate how this business is set up. This is something you can look into. Just because it says pharmaceutical or pharma, and you don't see co.ltd behind it, right? Company limited, or another abbreviation to show the company structure, something you can look into, allowing you to differentiate between a third world pharmaceutical and a first world pharmaceutical. Now, something that the third world pharmaceutical companies should be commended for, And something that I wish the underground labs, the reputable underground labs, and the first world pharmaceutical companies would adopt are the holograms and the QR codes and the serial numbers, which you can scan or type into their website to verify your product for yourself. Because with first world pharmaceuticals, it's supposed to go through normal supply chain, right? They have a barcode and a QR code coming from the manufacturer, ending up at the pharmacy or the hospital. That's normal supply chain. Whatever we find online or through the underground markets, that's outside of the normal supply chain. And the pharmaceutical company that produces these first world pharmaceuticals, the medicines that we use for a bodybuilding journey, they don't expect you to use that because it's all for off-label purposes. They don't expect their products to be used by bodybuilders. So their supply chain is normal through normal pharmaceutical distribution. Whereas with third world pharmaceuticals, these are specifically produced for bodybuilders, people who want to use these anabolic androgenic steroids for their fitness aspirations. And these companies understand that there's going to be counterfeits later down the line when this particular brand gets popular. Now, their supply chain is going to be a little bit different than pharmaceuticals. And most of the third world pharmaceuticals, they end up distributing all over the world through whatever means possible. But they understand that they might produce counterfeits further down the line because some shady manufacturer wants to ride the coattail of this third world pharmaceutical that has brand recognition. And then they counterfeit their entire product line. Maybe it only contains oil. And then they sell that for a quick buck. So these third world pharmaceuticals, the manufacturers completely understand this. That's why they have holograms, which can't be counterfeited. Or they have serial codes, which you can verify on their company website. But I understand why some of the first world pharmaceuticals don't put this into practice. Again, there are some countries which offer their own pharmacy app where you can verify the product that you purchased at the pharmacy to see if it's legitimate. And the third world pharmaceutical companies took this into their own hands with offering holograms that are unique to that particular company. And then they have a little scratch-off serial code and batch number. Sometimes it comes with a QR code that you can scan for convenience. It leads you straight to the website where you can verify your product and see that it's real and produced by this particular company. Now, keep in mind, some of the counterfeits have become so good that they're able to duplicate the hologram to a certain extent. And they can also produce their own serial codes and batch number with QR code. That when you scan them, you go to another website with a very similar name as the original third world pharmaceutical, maybe one letter different. So everything about the packaging, the hologram and the serial code and the QR code looks almost identical to the true original product. But you go to a different website where it says that it's legitimate, but it's made by a completely different manufacturer trying to make a quick buck out of somebody else's reputation. And what I've heard through the grapevine, and what is certainly a possibility, is that some of the competitors of third world pharmaceuticals, they actually copy an entire competitor's product line and then make it horrible quality, completely underdosed or nothing contained within, right? Shit product, flood the market with this shit product just to ruin their competitor's reputation, right? It's not beyond the realm of disbelief. Something you need to look out for. You don't want to be on the receiving end of such a practice. But I've seen it happen where some of the counterfeits are just tremendously horrible quality and poisonous oil that you certainly should avoid. So always make sure you do your due diligence researching a particular third world pharmaceutical, whether that's the website itself or the third-party source where you can purchase these pharmaceuticals, because you don't want to be on the receiving end of a practice where they actively try to ruin the reputation of a reputable third world pharmaceutical, or receive a counterfeit and now you're sacrificing or damaging your health potentially and certainly lose a lot of money in the process, right? So do your due diligence before you're thinking about making a purchase. Now, what annoys me about third world pharmaceuticals, and not all of them do this, but the majority of them do, is when you look at the composition of their products, it says the active pharmaceutical ingredient, right? Or the pharmaceutical ingredients, trenbolone acetate, for example. And then the rest of the ingredients are excipients, quantity sufficient, which when you look at true pharmaceuticals, they would say testosterone enanthate, castor oil, benzobenzoate, benzoalcohol, right? The true composition of the pharmaceutical that you're intending to inject. But with third world pharmaceuticals, they just say testosterone enanthate, quantity sufficient. Now, some of the companies mention that they use peach oil or tea oil, because what are these excipients? Is it benzyl benzoate? Is it benzyl alcohol? Is it ethyl oleate? Is it monoethylene glycol or polyethylene glycol or micliol or glucol? And what are these excipients, dude? Really, it pisses me the fuck off. Why these companies can't just mention what carrier oils, what is the composition of these products that they're trying to sell. For me, it's a huge red flag. I never use products of companies that mention excipients quantity sufficient, and I would highly advise you to do the same. Now, they could mention cottonseed oil and still be lying out of their ass, right? It could be grapeseed oil, and a large portion of that is ethyl oleate, allowing them to solve as much product within the solution as possible. And a lot of these third world pharmaceuticals, they distribute all over the world. So they might produce in a very hot country and then distribute to a very cold country where the solution would crash otherwise if they didn't put a significant amount of ethyl oleate or whatever other synthetic carrier oil that they use nowadays, right? I completely understand it from a business perspective that you don't want your product to crash when it's shipped all over the world and it ends up in a very cold climate. And due to the heat change or the product getting colder, all of the raw steroids come out of solution and crystallize. That's not something you want, because then that entire batch is basically lost, and all of the people that end up using it are extremely unhappy, ruining the reputation of your brand. So yeah, long story short, guys, if you see excipients QS mentioned on the product composition, run. Run for the hills. Well, just don't purchase the product, because again, you don't know what carrier oil or solvent they use. It's a magic secret that only the third world pharmaceutical company and the manufacturer knows. But you can't make an accurate decision what you put into your body because you don't know what this compound and this product contains. Right? And now that you know, you can make a much better decision regarding your own short-term health and certainly your long-term health. So that limits you to maybe 2 or 3 companies of third world pharmaceuticals that actually mention which carrier oil they contains, whether that's peach oil or tea oil. Now, this is an experiment you can run by yourself at home after you've made your purchase and ran the QR code or the serial code through the anti-counterfeit system on the website of the manufacturer, ensuring that your product is legitimate. You take a little bit of oil, whether it comes from the ampule or the vial, you put that on your finger, and you try to rub the ink off your insulin syringe. And if you don't have an insulin syringe, you can try it on a 3 milliliter syringe. I try to rub the ink off with the oil that is coming from this verified product. If the ink rubs off, right, the solution has such a high solvency that it can literally dissolve the ink off this syringe. Do you really want to inject this into your body, causing systemic inflammation and whatever other problem with long-term use? Personally, I don't want to inject that kind of stuff into my body. Now, it's not a 100% foolproof method because MCT oil also dissolves the ink off a syringe, but MCT oil doesn't cause any systemic inflammation. And Arachis oil doesn't dissolve the ink off a syringe, but in some individuals still causes systemic inflammation. So it's not foolproof. Consider this the first line in defense to assess whether this product contains a lot of solvents that might cause problems with prolonged exposure. That is just an easy experiment you can run at home. And if you're unsure, right, if the ink comes off and you're not sure, taste it, because MCT oil doesn't taste like munch. You can easily distinguish between MCT and benzyl alcohol, which most of these products contain for sterility purposes. Right, that stings a little bit. I'm sure you'll be reminded of a little bit of a night out of drinking, because in that sense, it tastes very, very similar to alcohol. But if it tastes like something that you would rather use to clean your car with, like something very, very chemical, or it smells terrible, that's a very high indication that it's a synthetic carrier oil that you shouldn't be injecting into your body. And again, Arachis oil, well, it tastes like peanuts. So that's also very easy to determine. So if the ink doesn't come off and you taste it and it tastes like peanuts, yeah, that's also something you might want to avoid. Again, Arachis oil doesn't cause systemic inflammation in everybody, but I'm giving you the information so you can make a better decision. And if after an injection or multiple injections, you experience something like test flu, or terrible post-injection pain at the site of administration, or redness, or lumps or bumps, or man, just feeling like sick and even dizzy after an injection for the first 24 hours after the injection. If you feel dizzy or sick, throw it in the trash. Right? This is probably the downfall of third world pharmaceuticals. It's this carrier oil they choose. And besides seeing this excipients quantity sufficient, which is already a red flag for me, if you still see that the ink dissolves off your syringe and it tastes horrible after a little of a taste test, so to say, yeah, I know, I would just throw it in the trash, guys. I would rather go with a reputable underground lab. Honestly, I would rather go with a reputable underground lab that produces at home through proper home brewing and mentions which carrier oil they used on their vial and on their website, if they have a website, or on their Proton Mail or Tetanota or a Counter Mail account, right? If they mention which carrier oil they use, all of our products use cottonseed, right? And no ethyl oleate is contained within, right? That I would rather lean towards making a purchase there than a third world pharmaceutical that doesn't mention which carrier oil they use. And I think that's pretty much all the essential information you might need to make an accurate assessment whether a product is a third world pharmaceutical or a first world pharmaceutical. Right? I really hope this helps, guys, and allows you to make very good decisions before you purchase particular products. I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're looking for the most comprehensive guides to bodybuilding pharmacology, you can find the ebooks on my website, vigorsteve.com/shop. Personalized advice always available through consultations. You can find the rates in the consultations section. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok @vigorsteve. Have a look at my link tree with discount codes for all the sponsors and affiliates that I'm associated with, companies that I highly believe in and support myself. If you're looking for over-the-counter supplement XYZ, supplements that I frequently talk about on this YouTube channel, just have a look at my link tree. I'm sure there's a link and a discount code for it. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. A front double bicep for you guys. No third world pharmaceuticals in these cannons, and that's because I learned the hard way, unfortunately. I used to run plenty of third world pharmaceuticals myself, third world pharmaceuticals that are being sold here from underneath the counter, from the back of some of the pharmacies here in Thailand. And I always had tremendous systemic inflammation, and I ran through plenty of different brands, checked the anti-counterfeit codes and whatnot, right? They were all legitimate. And I still had tremendous systemic inflammation, just for years on end, to the point I could not walk downstairs. I could not train without using capsaicin cream and numbing cream on my knees just before each leg day. And my elbows started to hurt. And I wondered why my high sensitivity C-reactive protein levels were always 10 milligrams or 12 milligrams, right? I learned the hard way, guys. I'm actively trying to prevent you from making these same mistakes so you don't have to undergo systemic inflammation for years on end because, well, nobody talked about it or nobody knew about it. This is, I think, something I discovered and tried to raise awareness of so you don't have to undergo the systemic inflammation for years, right? Because you're making much better decisions for yourself. And this is why I have a little bit of an adverse opinion on third world pharmaceuticals. Because really, guys, they can do their job and the manufacturing a lot better. First off, they can mention which carrier oils they use on the product composition and select carrier oils that don't cause systemic inflammation, just like most of the first world pharmaceuticals do, right? But discounting a Russia's oil, which might cause inflammation in particular individuals, not in everybody, but in certain individuals, right? Just bringing it to your attention so you can make a much better decision for yourself. Man. Okay. I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.